Spain is not a democracy. Spain acts like a dictatorship. All they're doing is imposing the law on us. They impose laws on us through judges and prosecutors. They impose laws on us through the police. There has been a police presence for weeks. They want to scare us with the police, with the justice system, with accusations of sedition and rebellion.
Catalans, Kurds, Biafrans, all have been pushing for independence with renewed fervour in recent weeks. And now, two regions in northern Italy have also voted overwhelmingly for greater autonomy. But what's behind this increasing drive for statehood? Best-selling author Parag Khanna argues that devolution, not democracy, is the biggest force driving global politics today. That's the desire for decentralizing power and responsibility to smaller units. It's quite a reversal from the trend of large nation states. In fact, the number of sovereign nations has almost quadrupled since the end of World War II. So is this just a natural progression? Can we expect to see more places wanting to break away? And what does money and globalization have to do with it all? Well, to help answer these questions, I'm joined now from Rome by Parag Khanna himself. He's the author of Connectography, Mapping the Future of Global Civilization. He was also named among the top 75 most influential people of the 21st century by Esquire magazine. Parag, so what's the impetus behind this awakening? For a very long time, we've seen civilizations, we've seen empires, a main driving factor to be more and more territory.
That's exactly right. It is a reversal. And actually, even though I argue that devolution is a more powerful force in the world today than democracy, let's remember that democracy is one of the drivers of devolution. Because once you have more democratic societies, they want more internal democracy, more local democracy. And it's those local units, the provinces, the cities, that are pushing now for greater autonomy, more devolution, and in some cases, yes, independence from the state itself. So ironically, if you support democracy, then you are also supporting local democracy and these devolutionary forces. But what's also very important to remember is that it's not just about independence. It's not about whether a province or a city separates completely and becomes a new sovereign country. What's also very interesting is the space in between full integration and total independence, which is this negotiation over what degree of autonomy. That's what's going on in Catalonia. That's what's happening in Veneto, in Italy. To some degree, because Kurdistan has not been able to break free, they are still within the Iraqi Federation. So in all of these cases, it's not all or nothing. It's about the negotiating space in between. And that is what devolution is all about. What degree of autonomy can this region or province or city have?
We're going to get into those specific examples in just a bit, but you say that democracy and devolution go hand in hand, that democracy is the foundation of our international laws right now. But it seems that your idea of devolution being a natural process doesn't go with international laws that are structured as they are today.
That's a very good point. There are two principles that are clashing with each other. One is the principle of self-determination of peoples, which we think of primarily as dating back to after World War I and after World War II with the decolonization process. The right of peoples to determine their own political future, to be free of colonial suppression, to no longer be part of the historical European empires of the 19th century and the 20th century. But it does clash with the sacrosanct principles of international law and sovereignty, by which there is supposed to be a consensus among recognition of state parties as to whether or not new countries are recognized. And that is a very conservative principle. It's a reactive principle. It's a principle that says that anything new that is created is causing the destruction of something else that was more valid, more legitimate, older, more stable. And so there is a bias in international law today against the liberal principle of self-determination. And it's these two 20th century principles that are really clashing with each other legally today. But on the ground, it plays out partially in that legal domain, but it is much more about the specific political circumstances of each case. And let's remember, most of all, each case is different because there's a different set of ideas about identity, how strong is that local identity, and most of all, we have to remember, each case is fundamentally also about money. It's about fiscal autonomy. It's about control over one's resources. It's the right to taxation, the right to determine how money is invested. That is one of the fundamental factors in every single case.
I'm going to get to globalization and money in just a bit, but you say that each example is unique. So is devolution a good thing for every country, for the entire world? Give me an example where it's worked for the benefit for all.
That's a really good question. Well, we've had many cases. If you want to take, again, a historical standpoint, let's remember, as you pointed out and as I wrote about in the book, the number of countries in the world has quadrupled since 1945, since the end of World War II. Don't we feel that that is a good thing, that people have been allowed to have their own nations, that India and Pakistan, African nations, have all become free from French and British colonial masters? So in that sense, this worldwide devolution pattern has been extremely significant and world historical and spread much more quickly and robustly than democracy has, which is backsliding in many ways, whereas devolution continues all over the world. So clearly it is a very positive trend in terms of people's ability for fulfillment. In recent years, we've seen East Timor, South Sudan, maybe Kurdistan, hopefully Palestine, become independent countries. In all of those cases, we would say that is a sign of progress towards the self-determination of these peoples. So I do think that overall it is a very positive trend. And remember the number one positive thing about it. The more new countries you create, the more boundaries you settle, the less international conflict you have. We have to remember this, and everyone must remember, that devolution and demarcating new and stable boundaries between countries is the reason that we have so few international conflicts today. Devolution is the most important cause of international peace. I want everyone to remember that.
But you say that more money, more revenue is the driving force for all of this.
Yes, so depending on the situation, we have cases, if you look at Scotland, in the advance of their most recent referendum, oil prices were high, and so there was a very strong momentum towards independence, not only because of a very valid historical Scottish identity, but they also realized that they would get to control more of the North Sea oil revenues that Great Britain as a whole was bringing in. So there was a lot of momentum towards independence. In the case of Catalonia, Catalonia is one of the richest provinces of Spain. It brings in a tremendous amount of investment and tourism revenue, and they feel that they have to share too much of it with Madrid, especially bailing out Spain in the aftermath of the financial crisis, a series of payments which they felt would be never ending because of the economic malaise there. So money does play a very significant role in these deliberations about how much local control over those finances there is going to be, without a doubt.
So can you put, if you were to analyze each case individually, can you put Scotland, can you put Catalonia, can you put the Kurdish region of northern Iraq all in the same basket?
No, I don't think it's fair to put them all in the same basket. They are happening at a similar time, but let's remember that we have been having relentless devolution for 75 years. I'm glad that more people are paying attention to it now. But there is a bit of just a coincidence at play when it comes to Kurdistan, Catalonia, Scotland. They're not necessarily all that related to each other. If you look at these situations carefully, they have decades, if not centuries of history. In the case of the Kurds, quite frankly, millennia of history. I think we have to be honest about that. So each of these situations is very, very unique. But I do think that, again, I want to make a sort of normative message, a plea, that by pushing these issues down the road, we don't settle anything. We have to recognize that there is an inner desire, a yearning for people, for the alignment of people, of identity, of territory, of economics, to be something that is within the control of the people who are most affected by them. It is a deep human impulse. It will never go away. So every country that is facing these dynamics, whether it is Iraq, whether it is Spain, whether it is England, they should deal with it head on. There are very tangible solutions to each situation that look different. In the case of Catalonia, for example, they could have an agreement about revenue sharing in which Catalonia gives a little bit less tax money than it has been giving. And they could also have infrastructure corridors funded by the Spanish government that would incentivize the Catalans to want to be more part of the Spanish Federation. So in each situation, I do believe that there are very tangible, practical solutions that would de-escalate and de-emotionalize these cases. But we have to work very hard politically to accept those solutions, because I actually believe they are very clear, they are very much within our reach, and they are on the table. So we really have no excuse to continue to fight over these situations where the solutions are staring us in the face.
And finally, I have to play devil's advocate. We don't have much time left, but have you thought about your theory backfiring?
That's a very sort of generally, of course, there are cases, again, if you look at South Sudan, the independence of South Sudan has been very, very painful. If you think about their very difficult relations with the North, their very poor infrastructure, the civil war within their ruling parties, even within Kurdistan, what we've seen is that the response to their referendum has, of course, been isolation by their neighbors, and they haven't resolved their internal tensions between their ruling parties either. So it is never a rosy situation, right? It's always very, very difficult. And as I said at the very beginning, I do not advocate independence in all cases. Some countries are not going to be better off when they're independent. I am studying the broader devolution category, which encompasses everything from slight autonomy over education policy to complete revolution and secession and independence. All of that fits in the category of devolution. There are many options that are peaceful, that are win-win, and that are mutually beneficial, and that can avoid the kind of backfiring that you rightly point out does in fact take place. So I'm very cautious about supporting full independence universally. I think that countries have to be very, very prepared for a future where they're on their own. But let's remember one other extremely important trend of history is that the smaller and smaller our countries get through this process, the more they actually need to be global and connected to each other, because small countries can't survive on their own. Okay. They don't have enough food, fuel, water, resources, goods, production, and so forth. So we actually get towards a more connected, more globalized world if we have greater autonomy.
All right, Parag Khanna, the author of Connectography, Mapping the Future of Global Civilization. Indeed, a very fascinating subject. Thank you very much for joining us.